Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Prince Podcast here on Podcast Juice. My name is Michael Dean. Joining me today is Mr. Big Sexy and Saxer. How are you?
Sunday morning, easy like Sunday morning. I'm doing well.
All right. And also, we are joined by the host of Muse to the Pharaoh, Kanisa. How are you doing this morning?
Doing okay. Definitely an easy, lazy Sunday morning that I appreciate.
All right. I wish I had that same energy, but I'll take that. All right. So today we are here to talk about. It was a great interview with Jesse Johnson on the Questlove Supreme show, a podcast that is available on Pandora. So if you want to hear that show, I believe you have to join Pandora to get access to that. I believe they have like a trial period that you can sign up for and listen to as many of them as you can, and then quit if you want or stay as a member. But it is definitely a part of Pandora. And I've heard of this show for a long time. This was my first time actually listening to that podcast. And boy, was I late to the parties. I had to go back and start backtracking and listening to, some of the other ones. So there's a lot of great podcasts or interviews in there in general. But of course, there are a lot of great Prince related ones in there as well. But before we get into it, let me just shout out Questlove and also shout out my guy Bill that helps put the show on and is on there. Just top notch. I was really a fan of that. And I would actually say, my favorite one though, that I've heard so far was actually Donnie Simpson. Like I listened to that and I was like, I forgot how much Donnie Simpson influences me and like how much I remember a lot of like just watching that all the time, and just his energy about him was just like, man, that was a great interview. And he's just a great guy. Like, I don't know, just something about him. And it really inspired me to like, you know what, God damn it, get back on my game. Donnie's that guy, man. He's like, I know for a lot of black, personalities, I forgot how much I really was influenced by Donnie, even how I try to do what I'm doing. And I always give it up for that Donnie Simpson episode when he went to Flytime Studios, and they were cutting Fishnet, the Morris Day song. That influenced me to get into music. Like I was watching that, I was like, God damn, I got to go to the studio. So shout out to Donnie Simpson. But anyway, we're here to talk about this Jesse Johnson interview. It's a 2-part interview. I believe it's episode 95 and 96. And as of this recording is the most recent guest that they've had on the show. And listen, I'm going to be totally honest. I've always wanted to interview Jesse Johnson. Hopefully that will still happen. But this is about the closest, I can get to getting some of his classic stories. And as you hear this interview, and let me say this too for the listeners, spoiler warning. This would be like, when we do our movie reviews. So we're going to spoil some things. So if you don't want to, hear anything about what they talk about, I would suggest you hold off on listening to this and go listen to the actual interview, because we are going to spoil some things. But I will say this, Jesse Johnson is a great storyteller. Old boy is hilarious. He is probably one of the most, just like genuine type of guys. You could just tell like you would probably have those same conversations if you was in front of him face to face. And I think that's what makes it so great to listen to, because even if he's like dropping some bombshell type stuff, the way he does it is just like, you just like, man, Jesse, you a fool. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just so fun about it. But anyway, I wanted to see what some of your guys' highlights were from the interview. So we'll just kind of jump around a little bit, but I'll actually go to Kanisa first. What was there? Was there anything that you really liked, or one of the highlights from the interview?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate how honest he is. And I mean, you kind of get that Jesse Johnson's going to tell it like it is, and he's not going to sugarcoat a lot. And from a story standpoint, unless you listen to like the Jimmy Jam, Questlove stuff, you don't really get a lot of more personal stories from back then. It's kind of more analysis from the people who were around back then. So he would be like straight up saying, hey, I'd call him out on stuff. Like we'd argue about stuff, or it was just me, him, and like more sometimes. And we were just like this trio. And you don't really hear that a lot. And it kind of gives the Black perspective of what all that time was, and what people were involved in, like him playing on 1999 and him being around for a lot of the creation of the Purple Rain songs and things like that I appreciate the most about this interview. And there are a lot of specific times, but generally that's kind of why I like these interviews so much, is because you get that personal kind of perspective from the Black perspective of what the 80s and early time was like.
Yeah, definitely. And you get to see his journey of, from his hometown coming to, Minnesota and all that, which is excellent. Big Sexy. What's your overall take, and if there's anything that you wanted to jump into specifically?
Well, there are so many things that, they talked about. 'Cause I liked a lot of the technical stuff. I liked how he talked about in the second episode about how he is just done with CDs. He's like, I'm not doing that anymore. When I do music now, it's going to come out in 2496. Now, a little side note to that is Jesse had, let's just say, I don't say a conflict, I don't use that word, but a disagreement with a client of mine that I got involved, and he and I had an actual long talk about it, directly, and we talked about technical things like that. So when he said that, I was like, yeah, he said I was going to do that. And I was just blown away by that. I was blown away by the honesty and clarity. And it wasn't honesty to be malicious at all. But it was like, this is what happened. When he talked about the Larry Troutman story, I'm like, okay. And about how, Jesse said, look, I respect the chain of command. If I'm your guitar player, I'm your guitar player. But then he would talk about when he got off the road with D'Angelo, no, man, fire me, go ahead, shit. Right. He definitely has something to say, and he will say it. And I like that.
Yeah, one of the things you really get you come away from this was, how involved Jesse was, back then, not just being around, but actually, playing on some of these classic albums, these older albums, right? And some of these songs, I had no idea that, Jesse alluded to, he's on the 1999 song, what did you say, Controversy?
Yep.
A lot of the stuff I would not have was no way to know, of course. And he talked about, not being credited for the things that he, kind of helped to, come to fruition, song ideas and things of that nature. And, really talking about sort of like, how do you deal with that when you hear something that came from something that you kind of did, and it sort of influenced Prince to do something, and you're not getting credit for that. It was very interesting, to hear him talk about, he said I would feel like a punk if I had to tell Prince, hey man, you didn't give me credit for the stuff, that type of stuff is very interesting. It goes to show how much he was obviously around during a lot of that creation process. And even he talks about even living with Prince, during these periods. One of the things I wanted to talk about was he was talking about playing music for Prince. And he talked about I think he was saying like Prince would laugh at him like, yo, Morris, listen to what Jesse got playing, listen to his stuff. It almost kind of felt like it was kind of clowning, you know what I'm saying? Like, is this stuff really good enough to be on the level of, what Prince is doing, whatever? But obviously, he's got great ideas because they go on to be, big songs like Jungle Love and things of that nature. But I thought that was very interesting to hear like a musician and, Jesse literally, still coming up and learning and being around this essentially established, guy, but who himself is still ascending to, higher levels of fame and prestige in the industry. So you really get to hear that sort of kind of a mentor relationship that he and Prince have. Obviously Prince, he says Prince knew how to make records, so I would go to there to learn how to cut records. You know, this guy knows how to do it. He's doing all this amazing stuff. That type of stuff is very interesting to listen to, because I feel like Jesse is like one of the baddest guitar players, you know, to come out of that. And so it's very interesting to hear him speak about that relationship. Another thing I thought was funny was, and this goes to like the press, was his interaction with Nelson George. And, you know, I know Big Sexy, I knew, like, remember getting Billboard, and, you know, Nelson George, I would go read his stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, okay, Nelson George, what is he talking about? And Jesse talked about when, I guess when Jesse was going solo, there must have been a review of his record or something by Nelson. And Nelson was saying something like, oh, probably Prince probably wrote and produced all this stuff or whatever. And, you know, you see a lot of this type of stuff nowadays, but to hear about it back then where an artist was kind of like checking, you know, a press dude, like, was kind of like, yo, you don't have the same energy that you had on the review. Now you coming to my party and you want to eat. He was like, man, get your shit and get the fuck out. I thought that was hilarious. It just really, yeah, it just go to, I could see like Jesse is probably like that cat, like, yo, man, don't let Jesse be in there by himself, because he'll been and turned the place out and got into something. Go ahead.
I think that was one of the most surprising things, because I think we mentioned on a previous podcast how he had that show at Bunkers a couple of years ago, and in person he's very like soft-spoken and gentle and nice, and it's funny kind of to hear how quickly it can shift for him. Like that switch comes on, and he's like, you know, ready to like fight in like 2 seconds. That was kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, which, you know, to me, it's just like, I kind of thought, like, a lot of those guys from, you know, the original crew of people, you know, Morris, Jesse, Terry Lewis, and all those dudes, I always wondered, like, how did they get along with the, you know, the Prince that kind of be like, nah, what? You know what I mean? Like, just that kind of attitude and somewhat borderline funny style type of, you know, behavior. And I know you just, you know, from listening to Jesse, you could tell these are like kind of street dudes, like straight from the neighborhood. Like, hey man, we let's do our thing. And then they have to, you know, sort of interact with a guy who is, you know, obviously very gifted, and almost, I don't know if sheltered would be the right word, but sort of, he just needs to focus on his music, doesn't have to deal with sort of like how my actions affect people at times, you know, just about what I want to do. So it's interesting to hear Jesse actually really speak about like dealing with that. And Jesse and them is not here for no games, in a sense of, you know, nah, Prince, I ain't with, you know, he told many of stories where he's just like, get the fuck out of here, Prince. I ain't, you know, Jesse, can you do, man, get the, you know, so I was like, that sounds real to me. I was like, a lot of cats probably would be like, man, come on with that bullshit, man. You know, this shit is good over here. Stop that. Stop it. So that was funny to hear, you know, the numerous sort of things of that nature. And it was interesting to really hear sort of that dynamic of the three of those guys, you know, Prince, Morris, and Jesse, and really how tight that kind of unit was. I think even Susan Rogers sort of spoke on that a little bit in her interview. And even she talked about, you know, where Jesse was the one that kind of really put me up on game in terms of like how these drums need to sound and how this needs to be mic'd and this and that and the third. And then he even sort of backs that up in his interview. But that's, you know, that crew, again, I never would have thought of it like that, because you never really heard Jesse go deep into those things, but to hear that they were like a little clique and working together and doing stuff. You know, he mentioned, he kind of talked about that Apollonia. I'm sorry, I'm all up. The Sheila E. album. And he just came out straight and said, yeah, that was from Vanity. The whole shot.
Yep. And she said no.
You know, which is, man, I was like, wow. I don't know, it could have been trying to take away the sort of musician, you know, what this Sheila E. brings a lot to the table too, though, right? Like in terms of musicianship and the drums and the percussion and all that. It would have been interesting how would that album have flowed with Vanity. I would have too. Vanity would have had one hell of an album.
Yep.
Would have had a classic song under her belt. Another classic song. She has Nasty Girl. But yeah, it was just a lot of little things. Just some of the things that jumped out to me too. I'm just jump around was the Purple Rain test screening in LA. And so he talks about, they had a test screening in LA, and he said it was a predominantly or a black audience. He just said it was a black audience. And he was like, they're going to let you know what they think of the movie. And he described a scene where he says Prince slapped the spit out of Morris. I would have loved to have seen that scene. But he said the audience wasn't buying it. Like they laughed at it. Like he described it as if it was Kevin Hart slapping The Rock. Like you could, there's no way you could take that serious. And he was like that. We had to go back and edit, take out a lot of stuff and reshoot some stuff. And he said this, they didn't touch it as he started talking about it, but I'm sure you guys caught this. When he started talking about that barn scene, the sex scene with Apollonia, he said it a couple of times that it was real.
Whoa.
And I don't know if they picked up I picked up he was saying like, no, they was really doing it. Not like it was a real scene. Like, no, it was real. And he said something like, yo, she really wanted that job.
Yep.
And then the other young lady that's in the interview, and I'm sorry, I don't know her name. She said something and you can hear Jesse say, yeah, that was like he just said it was like some early Weinstein before some shit like that. And they just said, okay, they moved away from that. But I was curious, what did you guys think about that?
I kind of assumed that they meant that was a real scene. Because, there are people on that set. And because we had talked to some other people that were there for that as well. And, they're not really having sex like that. Come on, guys. It's Hollywood. But interesting about how they said, she was doing stuff for the job. I don't believe that. I believe a lot of what was said about, some of the more scandalous thing to some degree, but sometimes I still think it's a little kind of rumor, a little bit, especially for that scene, because I've heard that too much from different people who were there and people who weren't.
Yeah. What's your thoughts, Big Sexy?
Well, I think when you have a young actress who has not much film work at the time of track, I don't know if she had any. I think she had some modeling gigs here and there, but she wasn't really, a name by any leap of imagination. Sometimes you let enthusiasm and things like that get a hold of you. And again, I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth, but maybe she's thinking, I'm doing this scene with Prince. Let me just do this because this is Prince, and we're going to do a little something because he, is Prince. Now, I don't know if they went for the whole enchilada on set. I would be surprised at that. But it wouldn't surprise me if it got a little more racier than they wanted it to be.
Right. Yeah.
People get carried away sometimes.
Yeah, he said it. He said, his words was, it would not have gotten past the censors or something like that. He said, and when real, I'm not thinking that, and it's not a porn the filming here. I just imagine maybe this would have been his first movie too. Being honest, I don't know if he was on the set. I'm not sure, but I know I would be like, it was real if I was there, and of course she was topless, and your boy is down there on the ground, and the chick's on top. I'm like, yo, this is some real shit. So I kind of think that's kind of what it was probably a mind blowing thing to see if you've never seen that before, to be in the presence of something like that. But it was just interesting that he was but again, for him to use those words of Weinstein and all that, I would. You want to go there, partner? But that was a trip to me. The other thing too, I thought was interesting when he talks about, again, I always felt like Prince has diss tracks, or he has lines for people. You can hear it through all this stuff. But when he talked about, we don't like new wave, I'd had no idea that was something that was, targeted for Andre Simone. It just never clicked to me. But when he said that, I was like, oh, you know what? Wow. Okay.
Yep, it makes sense.
I kind of see that. But then he's like, we're the ones that's gonna get the blowback from that, right? Mm-hmm. We didn't. That ain't me on that record. I don't feel that way. But we have to represent that. And he also talked about the Black Album and that kind of thing. He's like, Dead on It. That would have been a time song, only good rappers a dead rapper. He's like, we would have had issues, we've been fighting over. That's kind of funny. Like, you pretty much have to go along with the record. Like, if he says something crazy in them lyrics, people think that's you, right? Oh, is that right? So I wonder if there were times where people were thinking like, oh man, y'all dissing or something. And he said, we the ones have to fight that, not him. I know what you guys
There was
Go ahead.
The one example, even though this is Prince, when he called up Jesse and was like, I put you in my song, and it was Old Man Johnson's Farm from Raspberry Beret.
Right.
And like he called him and he said that and he hung up and it's like, come on, guy. Okay.
Yeah, when he said was something. He said Dead on It. He was like, there's little parts in there that are, it's like, I made a song about you. I would have never, but again, maybe it was an inside thing, I'd imagine, between them. But that's just funny. Like, somebody just call you randomly that you ain't talked to in a while. I was like, oh man, I got some shit out on you. Like, huh? Click.
Well, that part about the Time song, what song? One Day I'm Gonna Be Somebody, where we don't like New Wave, and he said it was an Andre. I don't know if you remembered this, but I remember when he said that, and he said it was an Andre, I remember Andre's solo album was called Living in the New Wave.
Right.
I'm like, okay. Oh, we're taking shots now. Okay. And I remember that album a little bit. I remember the single from it. What was it called? What Are We Doing Here? And that definitely had a new wave vibe to it. Definitely. But I never put it together until Jesse said it.
Yeah. Well, I guess that goes to the, I guess, there's a whole a petty Prince category. What's the other thing? The other thing, again, just because I never would envision it, the supposed about to fight between Morris and Prince. I just so he sets up where they were filming Purple Rain, and Jesse says that they had to always show up to set and be there ready to go, or just to be there. Now he's kind of saying, this is a way of Prince keeping tabs on what we had going on, so we just had to be there. And he was like, yeah, Morris would always come in clean, and at this one particular time, I guess he came in late, or the presumption that he was late, but maybe he wasn't. I'm not sure. It wasn't clear on that, but he was like, Prince was on him, like, yo, you late, and I can't. It's hard for me to picture that because I haven't seen that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but we don't see that as fans, right? We don't see that side of Prince. But to hear like coming up and sort of barking on somebody just seems funny to me. But then, he said normally Morris would be like, don't say nothing. But he was like, today he got time. Today Morris it was the wrong day. And he was like, they was going back and forth, nigga, what? and Jesse was like, oh shit, it's about to go down. Good. He said something like, good. I want to see Prince and get his, get in there and get it going. But he was like, yeah, Jelly Bean was in there. Come on, y'all, we supposed to be brothers. Y'all boys, come on. And he's like, man, if you don't get the fuck, let these niggas fight. That's what he said. But, the funny thing he said was that the reason why he was saying that, because he said Prince is usually the one, when it was, I guess it was, Jesse and Jerome would sometimes get into it, and he would be like, Prince was the one instigating for us to fight. So he's like, well, all right, same energy, Now, so I thought that was hilarious. Because I could just see that. On one hand, I can see it now that when I take away the mystique and all that and forget that these are just regular dudes, But I'm curious, what did you guys think about that story?
Well, I thought, the dynamic of Morris and Prince having beef, and then Jelly Bean, and I'm just, based on what I'm hearing, Jelly Bean is trying to break that up, because Jelly Bean's thinking, look, gentlemen, we have money to make, let this shit go. But sometimes you can't. Now, as far as Jerome and Jesse, And again, I don't know what kind of genesis of beef they had, but if I'm Jesse, I'm like, man, you hold the mirror and shut up. Maybe Jerome got sick of hearing that, and they had words.
Yeah, you gotta be easy because now Terry Lewis, that's his brother, and it's, gang up on you. But anyway, Kanisa, what did you think of this?
Yeah, it's stories like that, and then stories that Jesse told when they were at the concert, and I think either someone threw something, and they played their concert, and they're like, all right, and then went out and got the guy and brought him backstage.
Yes.
And the time was all like ready to jump him and stuff. It's like, like you said earlier, it's a reminder that all these guys are regular dudes at the end of the day, even Prince. Because I mean, on the one hand, you can't see him like, squaring up with someone like that, but then you can, because then you hear the Chad stories where he was ready to like fight people or had his notebook of insults or was like trying to race people who, shouted stuff on them. So I really love those stories for kind of making him human in that way. And especially when he's around these guys, because I keep saying, like, I want to see all these guys in a room, like in 2018, Prince was still here, and then reminiscing about stuff, because I bet it would be hilarious and kind of grounding for everybody.
Yeah, and that takes me to another thing Jesse mentioned when he was on the road with D'Angelo, and he talks about he got it was interesting. It sounded like it was a voice message, but then again, he said it was some sort of Google translation that, I don't know if you caught when he said that. He was like, he said this young lady got in touch with him. He couldn't say her name or something, but he was like, it was a message from Prince to Jesse. And Jesse said I hadn't spoken to him in years. And, he talks about in the message, he said that Prince was like, you got to be, I'm very much paraphrasing a lot, so I could be out of misquoting it. But the intention was to say, yo, Jesse, these people that I guess you playing with or who want to work with you, they want to be you or me or Morris, and like that almost might sound like that's beneath you or they're not on your level type of thing. But I guess he wasn't really saying who he was talking about. And Jesse Johnson was saying, I only let one person hear this, and it was D'Angelo. And he was like, D'Angelo even looked at me. He was like, who do you think he's talking about? And he's like, well, I don't know who he's talking about, but I do know who he's talking about. And I'm just assuming Prince meant D'Angelo or something like that, right? Which is, I was just like, I was interesting to me. I was like, man, you haven't talked to this guy in a long time. You're out here doing your thing. You're on the road, working with this, other cat who's hot, talented. But there has been, I think I'd say healthy competition, I would say, between, D'Angelo and Prince. And then he leaves that voicemail. I thought that was kind of like, I thought that was kind of corny, but I'm curious what you guys thought about that part.
Well, I'm not really familiar with a lot of D'Angelo's catalog, and having said that, I'm trying to find a high-resolution download for Voodoo just to see, what he's about. But competition is one thing, and you said it earlier, Prince can be petty, and maybe he saw that Jesse was doing something completely different and unrelated to what he had been known for doing, and he took a shot. Again, I don't know what Prince heard or didn't hear, and again, I have not heard Voodoo, but I do know that D'Angelo takes a long time before he releases his album because he wants it to be ready. He takes all the, and Jesse talked about that. And so maybe, Prince was trying to think, I don't know what Prince was thinking, but he definitely took a shot at the guy.
Yeah. And we're going to go to Kanisa next, but it's funny now because as I think about it, I'm like, I remember when Jesse initially joined D'Angelo, and there was conversation about that because it was like he was leaving the original seven, as they had to be called, because they weren't getting ready to go on the road. And he was like, yo, this is an opportunity. I got to eat, got to do my thing. I'm going to go over here and join this young cat. But I'm kind of like, it's funny to me that Prince would leave that message because I'm like, did you have the same energy to leave that message to say, y'all can use the name of the time so that maybe he wouldn't even probably went over to that situation you know what I'm saying, if they was probably allowed to have that name and go out there and do their thing without having to, you know, rebrand and start from scratch almost. So that's why I was kind of like, you know, you kind of pick and choose when you want to sort of say something. Now, again, I don't know if he had a conversation with them about that name, but obviously they couldn't use that name, which I think probably led to things not moving as fast for that band as they probably should have. But that's just my opinion. Kanisa, what do you think?
Yeah, if people can get their hands on the DVD that came with the Condensate album, they spend some time talking about how Prince wouldn't let them use their name. But as far as that call, for me, it's weird to think about Jesse Johnson playing guitar in someone else's bands. It's kind of like I know he did. I mean, after the time, at least, because, you know, he had his solo act and he was successful writing for other people. And so it's like, now you're playing guitar and there's a big part of contributing to someone's sound like that and helping to define it. But I don't know. I kind of look at that, or that comment he made, as from the perspective of you should be doing your own thing rather than, you know, being in someone else's band like that. But that's kind of how I saw it.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that too. I mean, it's one thing for a guy like Prince to say that, right? Like, because he gonna eat regardless. You know, he's not gonna. But again, at the same point, that'd have been like Larry Graham or somebody calling him and saying, "Well, why are you playing guitar for Tamar or Tamar? What are you doing? You're Prince." So I don't know, man, but. It was an interesting story. I'm glad he did share stuff like that. The other big thing, and I'm dying to know more about this, Jesse seemed to imply that there is some sort of 32-hour Prince cassette tape or music that is going to be auctioned off or something. Was I mishearing that? Or
no, you heard that accurately, and I don't know what it is, but I don't know who's going to be auctioning it off. But he was saying to Quest, like, I know you're the hardcore collector. Let me tell you where to get this from and who has it, so you don't get hoodwinked. Now, with something like that, it's almost along the line of that. I believe it was the Wu-Tang Clan album that was like one copy.
Oh, right.
You know, and whoever buys this, assuming it is true, it's got to leak out. You know, that's just the way things are, especially in digital form. But I'm real curious as to see what it is. But if anyone gets it first, it will be Questlove.
Yeah, I mean, he described it as, didn't he say like it had at least the second Prince album, there was like multiple takes or a whole different version of that. He said there was, and he let it slip too, there was the Hookers project was on there. And he said I remastered it or remixed it or something like that. Like I was like, what? Like, sometimes that it sounds like they edit the show, or I don't know if it's because it has those those time marks that it stops for a second and starts to play. So I couldn't tell if they were cutting parts out, but he wasn't very clear on what he was talking about. But like I said, it made it sound like there's going to be an auction of. That's what I assume. And he said, I don't want it to go into the hands of a collector or something like that. But wouldn't that be what happens in an auction? Because the person who does buy that, if it does leak, then I mean, they might as well just go ahead and give up the lawsuit, because you'll know exactly where it came from, right? It's like, so I don't know. It's a weird thing. What'd you think about that, Kanisa?
Yeah, because I was confused about that part too, because he'd obviously heard it and he kept talking about cassette tapes that he had from stuff. And then he mentioned like stems of music, stuff on For You. And I'm like, what is it? Does he have? I was busy reacting like, what? You have what? You have what? To really see like where it could be found. Because isn't that kind of how bootlegs happen, where they pay a lot of money to get their hands on stuff like that, and then they turn around and sell it and stuff like that. But yeah, interested to hear that as well. And yeah, he was saying like, I don't want it to get into the hands of people who wouldn't share it. So he wants it to be shared. It's just how. Yeah,
I mean, obviously that'd be a big legal issue.
Well, it could be. Remember back when he was doing the NPG Music Club, and he had the NPG's sampling series. Mm-hmm. If you bought that, it was clearance free forever. So maybe if the person who buys that 32-hour thing, maybe they have that same type of thing built into it.
Yeah. I already know the estate lawyers is
No.
and Warner Brothers like but I tell you what, if he does have that or whatever, they need to go ahead and that's what they need to put out. Like that would be the ultimate. I was like, that has to be. And just the way he described it is like, if I was a musician or a fan of somebody, I wanted to hear sort of the process of how these songs came together. He said there's multiple versions ahead and this and that before it got to the version you heard. He talked about Get It Up. It's like, man, just the bass work, the guitar solo's not there. I was like, my brain was melting. I was like, Jesse. But it sounds incredible. And I would not doubt that he does have boxes of tapes of that stuff, right? He was there during all of that. So that would be incredible. I'm like, if that is an auction, this is where the Prince fan base needs to get together and be like, let's just have a pot. And we just put in everybody puts in some money. And everybody who put in on that pot, you're going to get a copy. That would be the coldest move that could be done. So when they have these auctions, right? And there's the one copy of that rehearsal tape or this should be a fan. Maybe I'm just putting this out there. This should be a thing where the fans say, you know what? Yo, I'm putting in 200. I'll put in this. And we all get a copy of this. And we buy it. So then there can't be no issues because we bought it. You know what I'm saying? So we can share it amongst ourselves. I see this in gaming. I'm going to jump a tangent for a second. What is this? Kenisa, you may know this. It's a video game that has actually not been released. They have raised kickstarted, I don't know, $20-30 million or something crazy.
Whoa!
It's a space game from the guy who made Wing Commander, those games. I can't think of it's on the tip of my tongue what this game is called. But this thing has been in development for years, and I'm not lying. He has raised millions upon millions of dollars. They still have not released this game. They've put out little modules of it. Like, it's a very graphic intensive, realistic type of game where you can actually fly to different planets, land the ship, get out, walk around, space battle, blah, blah, blah. But I bring all this to say is recently they sell actual spaceships in the game, right? And they had some ship that's $27,000 in real, U.S. currency. And I've heard that there are groups of fans of the game who got together to raise that money and they bought the ship, right? So that's what I was thinking. I was like, God damn, if they can do that kind of stuff, it's got to be a thing where we can be like, if something does come down the pike, that's just like, and we can get over the hatred of, how dare they sell it? Yo, we got to get that tape, yo. We can argue about it after we got it. But I'm just throwing that out there. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what Jesse was talking about on that. Let me jump. Go ahead.
One story that we hadn't talked about, and it was funny to me because I was on Tumblr and there was this round of gifts that go around of Prince during Graffiti Bridge.
I was just about to go
here. Yeah. And everybody loves how luxurious his hair is. Yeah. And it's just this big appeal about that era of Prince. And there's a story that Jesse tells about being at a taping and something happens to where they tell everyone to clear the set. And they said Prince was sitting on the ground or laying on the ground. He didn't specify how, having a time. And Jesse came in to kind of calm him down. Apparently, and I'm so glad that I pulled into my garage when the story started because I would have run off the roof. Part of Prince's weave had fallen on the ground and he was very upset about, I guess, embarrassed, humiliated about that. And I was just like, hold on. So if you read the story, I think Steve Park's book, he talks about how Prince wore a wig during Purple Rain tour and some of the or maybe some of the filming, I think, because he had bleached his hair and it didn't go well. And so they had to cover that up for continuity. And it's like that during the tour too. And then we have weave for, what is that, 80, 89, 90? And you can tell if we watch, because like the Muse people pulled out all of our pictures and compared, and like you can tell when it's his hair and when it's like the weave hair.
Wow.
And I'm like, is it
investigative report?
Are we all being lied to? Like, what's happening with his hair?
Hey man, the fantasy must be maintained. The show must go. You know, I just thought it was funny, and I remember the scene he's talking about in the movie where he's like roughing up Prince. Jesse's roughing him up. So that's funny. And then he even dropped. He said Craig Rice's name. I almost wanted to just reach out to Craig, like, Craig, what happened with
Like, was he sitting on the ground? Was he like laid out on the ground? Like, was he having a tent? I need details about
Pimp
that.
down. It was a purple emergency. Clear the set.
Was it like one track just like on the ground? I'm sorry.
Wow. Hey, well, you know, I'm not mad. I mean, hey, it is what it is. And Jesse goes into talking about that and like, yo, you know what? I'm trying to get my weave in. What you talking? I'm trying. My shit late to the floor, nigga. So I mean, it is what it is. These are rock stars. Rock stars have a certain look. You know, we as fans, we want to see the razzle and dazzle, and that's what they gave us, man. And sometimes I guess if you got to get the piece. Now here's the thing, you know, we do give the sisters a lot of shit over, you know, hair weave, you know, lace fronts, but you know, I mean. My man, your boy, you know, he got them, and we love it. They like it, we love it. So, you know, it is what it is. It's just funny to me. It's funny that they had to clear the room. It's like, damn, it was a serious. I guess Kim wasn't there back. That's why I was like, I wonder. Kim wasn't around, but you know, maybe that's in her book. You never know. But yeah, that was a wild story right there. I was like, you're wrong. Or
even he was talking earlier in the earlier days how when he was living with Prince, Prince would do his own hair. So he'd had like his little skinny brailled curling iron, and he wouldn't leave his room until his hair was like done. And that was funny to me. And he'd come out of his room like totally dressed, totally had all of his makeup on, everything that he did himself, which might explain some of those early pictures. But yeah.
Well, one thing.
Go ahead.
Also, one thing that does, you know, tie into. And it's been said, you know, throughout time, men get into music for two reasons: money and women. And when Jesse was talking about, you know, we were trying to be pretty like Little Richard, and people would say, "Oh man, the guys think, you know, y'all whatever." And it's like, ain't nobody thinking what men think. We think what women think, right. And women like it, so we don't get it done. I'm like, okay, makes sense.
And that's what I wasn't picking up on it at first. When I listened to it again, I noticed they was bleeping a word. Was they saying faggot or something? Was that what they were?
Yes,
probably.
That's the word.
I was like, he's saying nigga this and I guess that's where it is. I just was like, what's going on?
Can't say that word nowadays.
Okay, all right. Well, but it's funny that I'm glad that he spoke on that because again, you know, yeah, they was you know wearing the makeup and you had the pink and stuff. But I love that he was like, you know, we doing it for the ladies. You know, and he said something like, I seen more crack, or he said something. I don't know if you caught that little comment. Like, I was like, Jesse is nut.
I remember an interview with Prince, a printed interview years ago, like in the mid 80s, because he mentioned about the high heel shoes. He said, "Do you wear them because you're short? No, I wear them because the ladies like them." Oh, there it is.
Yeah, it's if they ever do a movie, which I'm sure they will, they have to have stuff like that in a movie. I just think because it really put it in the time. I mean, you can't imagine a very popular male artist or black male artist today. You know, oh man, I was at you know Jay-Z's place, and he was just in the bathroom doing this, you know, putting rollers in his hair and putting on makeup, you know, that, but it's, you know, such things culturally just kind of shifting with the times, but it's just so funny to think about that now. Like, I thought they had like hairdressing stuff. No, they was doing it themselves.
Yeah.
You know, it's just so hilarious to me. He's like, where did you learn that from? Well, my mama did it.
And that's the most interesting thing about all these old school kind of interviews of them talking about that time, because you kind of think that, they had this whole WB machine behind them, but there was so much division between that machine and them as artists that they did a lot of that stuff on their own. Like when it came to promotion and stuff, maybe WB. But the day-to-day, while stuff was being made, they were all hold like 50 million people in a house living together. Mm-hmm. He tells stories about, hey, waking up Jesse to go, come listen to this right quick, and Jesse be like, yeah, that's cool. Or Morris would be like, I don't like that, So it's like this. They were all very close, and it's kind of interesting how Ragtag it seemed, because they didn't have they had the managers and stuff, but that wasn't their job. They had to make the music, and they were in charge of making up the image, and they were in charge of making sure that they look good. I'm sure they had their designers and stuff with them when they were going out, but day to day, that was all just them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't wait for the, what's the photographer that's books? Alan.
Can't
see. Yeah, Alan B. There we go. His book coming out. I can't wait to see those pictures, because I think when he was at the celebration, he talked about Prince was doing the makeup himself and all that type, and he would just show up. That was pretty cool. One other thing, just the D'Angelo part. I don't know if you caught. I swore he said in there that he made it sound as if D'Angelo recorded Summertime Thing. He's like, yeah, we played on that unreleased. And he said Summertime Thing. Now I know that they played that live at one of those performances. It's on YouTube, but it made it sound like they actually he recorded that song, which I just find strange, because I like the song, but it is kind of strange. Like, man, this guy is obviously sitting on a lot of unreleased music of his own, which he talks about in there. And I kind of have a love and hate about that, because I'm a big D'Angelo fan, but I hate that he does not put out music. Because I know the dude's talented. He obviously must have, listening to what they're talking about, he's got music that's sitting there done. I can't understand why is he not putting the stuff out. Can't be that much perfectionist. We're not you can, okay. But to me, as much as a fan of Prince, I know D'Angelo is, you have to release the work. Prince did not just hold back music. He put shit out. He may not have put the songs you wanted sometimes, but he was a machine. He was releasing stuff. And that's the only, I just was when I hear that, I'm like, you mean to tell me this dude has all this music? And the way they describe it is some of the greatest shit you want to hear. We need that, man. We need you to put that stuff out. So I was just once again, I'm hearing about, D'Angelo and not putting the music out. I always feel like D'Angelo, Lauryn Hill a little bit. To me, I say this because I love these guys. Let me be clear. Well, one part of me as a fan, I was so disappointed, because I always felt like they held back their greatness. They were on the cut. They were going to be the next thing, in my opinion. But, whatever happens, the personal things, whatever was going on, the one thing I felt like they didn't carry forward that they should have learned from the previous generations of Prince and all those guys, well, you got to put the work out. It means nothing if you won't put it out. You got to take it to the stage, or you got to keep going. And I just felt like hoarding that stuff in. It's man, they're not really ready to take the mantle yet, because part of the mantle is you got to get down. You can only talk about stuff so much, right? And you might have the shit, but if you don't present the shit out and take the risk that if people don't like it, then he's not really ready to take the mantle from the, what I mean? It's that's why I always kind of, when I think back, I'm like, man, dude would have been the next thing in my opinion, he would have been the next thing. But no matter how good you are, if nobody gets to hear it, then it's it doesn't mean nothing. And that's not a shot to any of those guys. I got mad love. Please believe that's just my observation, my opinion, because I want to see them put this shit out, and I know they sitting on the coldest shit. But anyway.
Well, one thing though, I remember the Prince omnibus film. Sheila E. said, Prince, when he come to record, set up, let's go. A lot of the jazz people that she used to work with, and she said, Billy Cobham, George Duke, they would spend hours getting one drum tone right, and I was reading Bruce Springsteen's book, same thing. Let's get the drum tone right. Let's get this right. And it takes, so many musicians will take all this time to get every sound right before they play it and record it. Whereas Prince was like, is it on? Yeah. Are we recording? Yeah. Let's go. You know, they would capture the feeling more than be concerned about the nuances of the perfection of the sound. And it sounds like D'Angelo was, you know, one of the classic musicians in that sense, that everything has to be right. Then they can go ahead and record it and get it out there. And that's just not good or bad. That's just the way they are.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt it. I mean, it's just that he's got the shit done. So it's like you don't sit 14 years in between releases, unless you Michael Jackson or something, where you know your album would stand on test of that. But then again, I still love what he's doing. One other thing I wanted to add to, and I love this interview, as I said, was excellent. The only thing I guess I probably think, if there was one thing I wanted to get out of this that I didn't, was discussions on Jesse's albums, like his, you know, what was that first album? When that first album came out, it was banging. Like you just, you know, I don't think they even mentioned Free World. Like, when was it when you dropped that 12-inch B-side and you shut the game down? You know what I'm saying? Or what was the second album process? They never, and I could have sworn they would. These are the guys that are scholars of Prince. The conversation about what's the song? Don't see me walking down the street one day. Don't say nothing to me. Do yourself a favor.
Yes.
I would have. Like, I wanted to. Yeah. Why did you do Prince's version over that song? Like, what happened with that? Because of all those phone calls you talked about, I'm sure there was a phone call about that. So those are the things I would still need to be discussed, or would love to hear Jesse talk about. You know, I love that he talked about that tomorrow in the scene. I always wondered about that. Like, one, why was there such a long period of time between her first album and the second album, and why I thought the second album, there just seemed to be no promotion or nothing. Now I understand why he was like, you guys do it. You know, and I also would have loved to hear about The Crash, right? Like, the band he produced. That first album was banging, and of course, there was that whole, thing, alleged sort of child molestations, not with Jesse, but one of the other members of the band. They ended up having to change the band's name, and they came out with, I can't remember what was the name of the band. The second album, they totally changed the name, and they were like on some funk Minneapolis rock shit, but the second album was like some New Jack type swing. But they had a new singer. I can't remember, but I would love to hear about all that. I mean, there had to be a thing about that. And I don't know if you remember, Mark, Jesse. He was like in the spotlight when he was really popping. There was some, and I have to go back and do my research, but I remember there was something going on where he had like an altercation with the police, or was a domestic thing. I'm not trying to put stuff out on you, brother, if you listen, because I'm just not clear about it. But I remember like he was in the news because there was something going on with him, and like the authorities was involved or something. And it was something, you know. I don't know.
I remember that vaguely.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull that up, because. And again, we're not trying to put anybody on anything.
Nah, not at all. But I would have loved him to dive, ask about some of that type of stuff too, because he had his own career. Like, there was things going on. So yeah, those are things I would love to hear about as well. Aside from the Prince stuff. But yeah, man.
So while you're looking that up, there's this other story, because we hear a lot of different versions of the food fight story. And Jesse gave some insight into how it came to that, where they were playing pranks on each other. And I think during the tour, Jesse was standing on the side of the stage, and there's this part where I guess Prince pulls a pair of panties out and does stuff to it. And so Jesse switched the panties out with like really big ones. And so Prince starts pulling it out, and he keeps going and keeps going because they're so huge. And like, meanwhile, Jesse's on the side of the stage, like dying because these huge panties that he pulls out, and it still has to continue the show doing that bit. But yeah. And he said that Prince was real mad about it too.
Yeah, that like I said, a lot of those are golden type stories that I would love to see them sort of reenacted or somehow. Just hilarious. All right. Any last things before we wrap up on Jesse? And again, shout out to Questlove and all those guys. Did an excellent job with that interview.
Yeah, there was one thing that Jesse mentioned about the merchandising that really shed light on the Times, appeal to men and women, because you could go to the show, and, go to the merchandising table. Oh, what do we got? I got a shirt that says, "Ain't nobody bad like me." Mm-hmm. Men will buy that. Then you go to the Prince table. I belong to Prince. Yeah, I'm not going to wear that. Yeah, that's not going to work. So with that, that's why the Times audience was probably a little more galvanized than Prince's was at that time. It was more inclusion. And the thing about bringing people in the back and having to check them, yeah, that ain't new. I was a roadie back in the day, and, sometimes people in concerts, for whatever reason, get stupid, start throwing shit and all that, and the band sees it. They motion to the roadies. We're like, row 14 CF. Yeah, get him. And they bring him back there, and, we have a discussion. It happens.
Yeah.
Not surprised at all. And also, this last thing, when they talked about Sly Stone, I had no idea that John McClane put that together, and I didn't know that Sly was not in the studio with Jesse when they did it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
They never met till the video shoot.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I would say that's a guy who I want to see be interviewed, is John McClane, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That dude. And I think right now he's in charge of the Michael Jackson estate, right? Like,
oh yeah.
He's got his hands in a lot of stuff. I'm not want to get into it, but the other part that is worth listening to is also the vanity blocking stories. I can only imagine, like, you walk out there with her standing next to you, like, and looking like she has something to do with you, and you're a dude, like, of course. Well, that's like, I don't know what he was thinking. As fine as she block all day, you ain't gonna get nobody walking up on you for that.
I'm mad she was like a sister about it, so she'd be like, yeah, she wasn't good enough anyway. I'm like, dude, come on.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, even aside from what she's saying to him, like, just I was looking at them, I would be like, oh, he's good. Like, I would imagine a female would be like, oh, hey, okay, he's spoken for. But yeah, that's funny to me. All right, well, I implore you to go listen to that episode and actually check out some of the other ones. The Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, I listened to that one. That was really good. Like I said, for me, Donnie Simpson. Real quick, what's some of you guys' favorites over there?
I checked out Sheila's as well as Jimmy Jam and Terry. I'm probably going to check out Stokely's as well. Okay. Really any of the Purple-related ones. But other ones, too, because I'm interested in Donnie Simpson as well from back in the day when I was, like, 2. But, yeah.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, Donnie. I won't. Have you guys listened to it, the Donnie one?
Yes.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah. So I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's an interesting Black Album story in his. And I was like, whoa. And some could argue maybe he had something to do with that album not coming out, but you definitely got to go check that out. What about you, Big Sexy?
Well, I enjoyed definitely Lenny Kravitz because, he's a musician. And a musician's a musician, actually, just like Greg Fillinganes. I enjoyed his. But I want to listen to Cree Summer because she's an actress as well as a musician. And I want to see the one, I just noticed this as I was looking through it. He's got, I'm going to butcher her name, Lena Waithon. And I want to hear what she's talking about just as a filmmaker. And, I enjoyed Sheila's. I love Jesse's, love Jimmy's, loved Alan Lee's.
Yeah,
that's the one that turned me on to the show.
Yeah.
Alan blew me away. And I told Mike this off air, and I'll say it on air. Every time I listen to Questlove's show, I have a nice tall, cool glass of haterade because he's getting guests that we want.
Hilarious.
You know, he got Ala Leeds, he got Jimmy, he got Jesse. I'm like, well, I want those guys. We want to get those guys.
You gotta ask them.
Got to get to them to ask them, you know. But I'm not giving up.
No, not at all. Not at all. All right. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you enjoyed this show. Please check us out at podcastjuice.net. You can hear this particular episode of the Prince Podcast and others, of course, Music to Pharaoh. And also check us out on YouTube. Just look up Podcast Juice. And as I always say about this time, work it like a job. We'll see you next time.